The Florida Joint Center for Citizenship presents the Federal Courts. So we know about the levels, functions, and powers of the state court system here in Florida. Let's now turn our attention to the federal court system. The federal court system. In this video, we will learn about the levels, functions, and powers of the courts at the federal level. Some things you'll be able to do after watching this video. You'll be able to tell the difference among the levels, functions, and powers of courts at the federal level, and you'll be able to recognize that the jurisdiction of the federal courts is derived from the U.S. Constitution. Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution outlines the federal court system. Article 3 gives Congress the power to establish courts below the U.S. Supreme Court. Federal courts hear cases involving the federal government or the U.S. Constitution. There are three levels of federal courts in the United States: district courts, appeals courts, and the United States Supreme Court. Let's start our discussion with district courts. There are 94 federal judicial districts, with at least one in each state, and district courts in the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. 3 U.S. territories, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and the U.S. Virgin Islands also have federal district courts. These courts have original jurisdiction, which means that certain cases must begin there. U.S. district courts decide on the facts of a federal case and are the trial courts for both civil and criminal cases at the federal level. These are the only federal courts where witnesses testify and juries make decisions about the case. So what happens if you lose your case in a U.S. district court? Well, it can then be appealed to the next level, the United States Court of Appeals. United States Courts of Appeals. There are 12 regional U.S. Courts of Appeals. These courts review the decisions made in a lower district court. Appeals courts have appellate jurisdiction, which means they can review decisions from the lower courts if the people or groups involved believe the lower court made an unfair decision. Appeals can occur if 1. The lower court judge applied the law incorrectly, 2. The lower court judge used the wrong procedures, 3. New evidence turns up, or 4. A citizen's rights were violated. The United States Supreme Court. The highest federal court established by the United States Constitution is the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court usually consists of a Chief Justice and 8 Associate Justices, and these justices hear cases that may come out of either state or federal courts. They choose which cases to hear, and the cases usually involve a question about the U.S. Constitution or federal law. So what kind of cases will federal courts hear? Well, this is based on jurisdiction. Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution gives the federal courts original jurisdiction to hear 8 kinds of cases. 1. Cases involving the U.S. Constitution. These are cases where a person believes that a constitutional right has been violated. 2. Violations of federal law. These are cases where the government accuses a person of a federal crime. 3. Conflict between states. These are cases where state governments have disagreements. 4. Disputes between people in different states. These are cases where citizens in different states have disagreements. 5. Lawsuits involving the federal government. These are cases where the federal government sues or is sued by an individual or company. 6. Cases involving foreign governments and treaties. These are cases where there is a dispute between the federal government or private citizens and a foreign government. 7. Cases based on admiralty and maritime laws. These are cases that concern accidents or crimes on the oceans or seas. 8. Cases involving U.S. diplomats. These cases concern U.S. diplomats working in a U.S. embassy or in another country. Don't forget, too, that the federal courts also have appellate jurisdiction, which means cases can be appealed to them. Well, we certainly have a complex and deep court system at both the state and the federal level. Before we take a look at where these courts get their powers and jurisdictions, let's check in. Question 1. What are the 3 levels of the federal court system? Answer: U.S. District Courts, U.S. Court of Appeals, and the U.S. Supreme Court. Question 2. Your friend tells you that she just found out her case will be heard by the U.S. Supreme Court. What kind of question would your friend's case involve? Answer: a question about a constitutional issue or federal law. Question 3. Why can't a jury ever find anyone not guilty of a crime within a U.S. Court of Appeals? Answer: U.S. Courts of Appeals do not have juries, although U.S. District Courts might have juries.
Thanks for watching. This video is produced by Florida Joint Center for Citizenship at the Lou Fry Institute staff. Have a great day.